Welcome to the Lone Star Shadows podcast, the very first episode. My name is Zeke Dorr.
And I'm his mom, Christy Dorr.
In our inaugural episode, we thought it fitting to tell the story of Krishonda Townsend, or Shonda. Shonda is from close to my hometown of Mineral Wells, where I was raised.
Yeah, and it's also where I have lived for almost 40 years.
This story remains a mystery 13 years later, and her family remains hopeful that one day they will get answers as to what happened to their Shonda.
Shonda was a 19-year-old single mother from the small town of Perrin, Texas. She had been adopted along with her siblings by a sweet couple who took them in. Her family speaks of her as initially shy, but when she warmed up, she was the kindest, most caring person. Shonda was involved on the dance team at her church and worked in an in-home daycare, and then her son Hayden was just a small toddler at the time she disappeared.
On July 4th of 2010, Shonda had spent the day with her family at the lake to celebrate Independence Day. This was an annual event for them. As the night wore down, Shonda had decided to spend the evening with friends, and her mother took Hayden to the house to put him to bed. Just after midnight, on the morning of July 5th, Shonda sent a text to her mom from her best friend's house to let her know that she was on her way home. That was the last communication received from Shonda's phone.
Talk about the timeline of that night. Again, you can go online and there are theories spread all over the internet about what that timeline looked like that evening and, of course, the morning of the 5th. But I want to hear kind of from your standpoint, but also from a formal standpoint, as far as the investigation is concerned. What did that day look like?
Well, I mean, first of all, 4th of July, she spent the day at the lake with her family. She was there most of the day, and she went home, and Hayden was at home with Grandma, and she went ahead and took off to hang out with her friends in Mineral Wells for a little while longer. And we don't really know all the details of all that, but I do know that they stopped at a convenience store on the way to her boyfriend's house. I think it was to switch out a vehicle with their sister, because her best friend was a twin and they had an older sister. And so they switched out the vehicles, and the girls proceeded to go to her best friend's boyfriend's house. And that's where they hung out. She ate, took a shower. And before she left that night, she posted on Facebook, and she says, I got this.
Mm.
I had read that, and I wondered if
nobody could understand.
No one's really ever thought there was anything
Nobody has ever figured that out.
Yeah.
Well, to our knowledge, we couldn't figure it out. Only our Shonda knew.
Was that out of character for her to do something like that?
I wouldn't think so. Because, she could have been, honestly, if you think about it, she was trying to be the best mom she could. She was trying to make ends meet and take care of her son. She was trying to go to college. She was doing all this without, Hayden's father. So she might have just been saying, like, hey, you know how young girls are. She'd probably be like, I got this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
what I kind of gathered from it.
Had a fun day and maybe was feeling good about
herself
that evening.
She was feeling a little, hey, I got, she had her big girl pants on. I think she was doing fine. I don't really think there was anything bad about that post from my point of view. Like I said, only our Shonda knows what that was about, But I know that she left, and her bestie walked her to the car. She got in the car, and she texted her mother. I think if I'm not mistaken, it was 12:15 a.m. and she texted to her mama she's on her way.
Mm.
And that was the last time we saw or heard from her.
And you feel pretty sure that was actually her that sent the text, and that.
Oh yeah, her best friend was standing right there. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. She was. How the girls were probably saying goodbye. She was probably in the car. Her bestie was standing there. But yeah, she actually texted her mother that she was on her way.
At that point, and you said that was the last text or last anything
we heard from her. Yes. The last thing. And I don't know, because like you said, there was so much said and so much going on, and it was just such a roller coaster sometimes, because like when Monica was trying to help me, when I was trying to help be a family liaison and kind of help so they wouldn't have to go through all this. She told me, she says, when people send in, like, for instance, like, well, I saw this or I saw that. She goes, half of it's probably not right, but there's always some truth to it. Mm. Or maybe there's some kind of truth to it. So you always take it in, no matter what or how absurd it may sound. You have to listen. And we were trying as hard as we could, and there was a lot of things that came in was said, so it was just kind of hard to take it all in. But if I'm not mistaken, they said that her phone pinged off of a tower at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and it was like out there at the crossroads right there at between Mineral Wells and what is it, Grayford? Is that the one where the
Pedenville?
Yes, there you go.
Stop sign.
Yeah, they said it pinged off that, and they never found the phone.
It's right to this day they haven't found the phone, correct?
Well, to my knowledge, I don't think so. But I do know that the files that when they turned over the case had very little information in it, to be honest.
Yeah.
That was what the detective had told me.
What about phone records?
That's the thing. They said there was no phone calls or nothing that they could link it to. You know what I mean? They just said it just pinged, like the signal. You know how even though you're not on your phone, it connects to a tower, or it pings off of a tower if you pass it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's basically what it was. It was a ping. It wasn't an actual call or a text message. It was just a ping.
Talk to me about that next day. Shonda obviously doesn't make it home.
The next day, Carolyn woke up, and she was obviously very concerned because Shonda had told her that she was coming home that evening. So when she woke up and she wasn't there, they got really worried, because that definitely was out of character for her, because Hayden was small and Hayden was home, and he was, she knew that she was, to get home to her son and everything. And so when she wasn't there, she woke up and went in there to check, and she wasn't home. She really freaked out. They went outside, looked, her car wasn't there. So they were like, okay, what's going on? So I'm assuming that they looked, called around and nothing. So they tried to call the police over there in Jacksboro. And the police told them that it's too early to do a missing persons report. So what they said was that you could report the car missing, stolen. And they said, yes, we'll do it. So they did that instead. So what they did was they reported Shonda's car missing. So I guess since it was early hours, it had gotten to, I guess how they share information between counties and whatnot. Early that morning, I'm going to say maybe 6-ish or something, Mineral Wells Police Department did come across Shonda's car, and they said that the doors were open and everything, and it was parked out in front of the house. So they said they closed the doors up and everything, and then they ran the tags. And when they ran the tags, they came up missing or stolen. And that's how we found Shonda's vehicle. But no Shonda, of course.
I want to know, there's so much, as we were researching this, there's so much to dive into, but I want to know about Shonda as a person too, and just kind of get a feel for who she was and kind of understand, Shonda, what did her friends think of her? What did her family think of her? Kind of talk about that a little bit.
Well, growing up, she grew up in Perrin. It's a very small little town. She had her peers, of course, from school and everything. And then as she got older, she was a large, very large part of the church. So she was always in the dance and all that and stuff like that. So when they would go to other churches, or just basically she met other kids and other people through Mineral Wells and whatnot. So she was a really, really sweet kid. She had a big heart. She really did. And she loved everybody. She had the most I don't know how to describe it, but her little laugh would just make you smile. She had this cutest little nasally voice that would just, it was just precious. But she had a lot of anxiety, and a lot of it became back, from her background, as from being young, and then being kind of, I wouldn't say sheltered, because she wasn't really sheltered, but she was just, like I said, growing up in a little small town, you don't really get an idea of what this big old world has to offer, you know what I mean? So she did have a lot of anxiety, and she would get really nervous around strangers. She would get nervous when she would have to go do things around a large group of people sometimes. And so the only time that, like I said, she really, really came out of her shells when she was doing the dance and stuff. She loved that.
I have a tendency to think that people from small towns tend to not meet a stranger, but I think that's based on my own perception, and it comes paired with me being a guy who has never met a stranger myself.
That's true.
I, too, am from a small town, but when we spoke to April, she spoke of Shonda being leery of people she was unfamiliar with. When I spoke to someone very close to Shonda on the phone, she confirmed that she in fact was shy when meeting someone new, but eventually, after some time, she'd warm up and would become comfortable with her circle of friends.
We make note of this because it's important to consider how Shonda ticked and what the night could have looked like when she disappeared. Shonda seemed like someone who wouldn't just end up in a situation like she did with someone she didn't know.
On the morning of July 5th, Shonda's mom wakes up expecting to find Shonda at home, and as she looks in to check on her, she's not there. After checking with friends, the local police department is contacted, and the family attempts to file a missing person report, but as these situations often go, it was too soon. The expectation was likely that she was with friends still and that she'd show up eventually.
Yeah, I hear these types of stories all the time, and from my lens, and likely from the lenses of most of us, this feels like it just doesn't make sense. Bottom line is, people not showing up when they're supposed to, it happens all the time. It makes sense for families to be concerned, but on the flip side, it makes sense on the side of law enforcement for them to wait a period of time before they are able to formally file a missing persons report.
You're right, it seems crazy, but I do see both sides. It seems that it happens so often that an adult may just need a minute to themselves, especially somebody like Shonda. She was a single mother and may have just needed a break. I mean, anything's possible, but here's where things begin to get crazy. The next day, Shonda's vehicle is found in what is known to police as a heavily populated area for drugs. The most the family could do at that time was to report her vehicle as stolen.
They notified the family and said, the vehicle's found. You can come over. Basically, they're like, well, come over and get it. And so my family went over there, and when they got there, of course, everything was closed up because when they had found the car, they went ahead and locked it up and closed it. I guess they didn't want anybody messing with it, of course. So immediately, right there, they had the family open it up. So they're putting fingerprints all over a vehicle they don't know what's going on. So it's just automatically evidence is just it's just a mess, basically. So the family opened the doors. They looked around. The radio was ripped out. It was, it was a mess because things were thrown around. And, they said that Shonda takes off her jewelry when she swims, but her jewelry was there. And that was very, very odd. I was like, and they were like, well, why would she leave her jewelry in the car? And so the trunk, of course, her brother actually is like, I have to check. So he opened the trunk. And they opened the trunk, and of course, nothing, but her school books were still in there. All her college books were in there, and just whatever things a young girl would carry in her trunk, I suppose, but nothing out of the ordinary.
Because this vehicle is considered stolen, local law enforcement requests that the family come and pick up the vehicle despite Shonda's disappearance. Again, we're not here to call anyone out whatsoever for how this was handled, but we do know the family had questions, of course, when the vehicle was found. According to Shonda's family, the keys were hurled far away from the car, and the driver's seat was pushed all the way back when a family member retrieved her gray Toyota Camry.
We have to understand that we don't have the complete context here. Hindsight is usually 20/20. Ultimately, as most families would feel, Shonda's family felt like enough wasn't being done to find Shonda. They began to call in the troops.
About a week or so into Shonda's disappearance that finally we got our own search party together, because I was like, we gotta look. We gotta find something. Something's not right. So we looked all over as best as we could. And I mean, being so far away, I honestly, didn't think I slept very much. And I know my family was kind of worried about me. And they're like, well, April, I think you're kind of stressing yourself out and worrying too much about it. But I felt driven. I felt very driven. I was like, something's not right. We got to find her. I just knew in my heart something wasn't right. And I couldn't stop. I had to find her.
The search, you just began to reach out to anybody you could find, as far as online, obviously, news stations.
Well, I started the group the group page on Facebook, and I was just reaching out to everybody local and saying, hey guys, look, this is what happened, this is what's going on. And of course everybody agreed something's not right. And so everybody kind of got together, especially from the family. I know that our church had a big prayer in the park for her. And I know that at the time, David, he put a lot in the newspaper in Mineral Wells for me. He helped out tremendously. He was awesome. And he really, really helped me out a lot. And he would go to a lot of the fundraisers that I had and for Shonda, and the search. He definitely was helping get the word out as well. And then I had a bunch of awesome people that I helped that went and picked up. I called all the printing companies in Mineral Wells and asked them if they would give us free flyers. And they actually did give us a bunch of free flyers. And I had the volunteers go pick up those free flyers and pass them out. Stick them anywhere you can find them. And I know our family members kind of drove around with them in the back windshield, and just kind of, we're trying our best just to get people to listen.
The search has now begun for Shonda, and as you've heard, this includes volunteers from the community and a nonprofit organization known as the Q Center for Missing Persons, who bring along horses, canines, and people on foot. News stations were called, newspapers, and billboards were installed with Shonda's face and her pink braces. Mom, you went and searched at that time, right?
I sure did. I remember just beginning to follow this case on social media really closely and talking to a lot of my friends and family on the phone about it. And I had one friend who was following it very closely like I was. And when we heard there was a search going on, I called her and I said, hey, do you want to go out and join the search? So we did. And I remember we even drove out south of town and saw some of her friends out on the bridge and spoke with them, rolled the window down and spoke with them. And they were looking down over the bridge into the creek there and said, there's not anything down there. And so we just moved on. But actually, that's not very far away from where her body was actually found over a year later.
It's so crazy. I remember when all this was happening, I didn't live in Mineral Wells anymore, but there were volunteers all over the place. There were people searching. It was people coming from all over Texas to help search for Shonda. Well, just days after a prayer vigil was held for Shonda, about a year and 4 months after she had disappeared, April receives a call from the Q Center for Missing Persons. This was October 28th of 2011.
Well, it was at night. I can't remember what time, but it was already dark, and it was evening time, later evening time maybe. And Monica was on the phone, and Monica was like, April, she goes, I have something to tell you, talk to you about. Actually, she's like, I need to talk to you about something. I was like, okay. And she's like, no, honey. She goes, some remains have been found. And of course, my heart just sank. But in my heart, I knew I had already known that she was gone. And I was like, okay. I said, what do we got to do now? She goes, well, there's a process. She goes, there is a process. She goes, they have to take so many, inches of the bone intact to have it analyzed. And she's like, and the bones are very, very fragile and deteriorated. The weather was bad. That's why I say I think she was there the whole entire time, because her remains were in really bad shape. Really bad. They were very brittle and just, they couldn't even get the sample, the big enough sample that they needed. And she goes, but April, she said she had braces. She had pink braces. And she goes, honey, she was, I can almost promise you that's her. So I just want to let you know. And I said, okay. I said, well, can I tell her mama? And she said, yeah. She said, go ahead and tell her mama. So I called Carolyn and told her.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I know that they expected to get this call probably one day, but at the same time never could have actually wanted to get that call. Her pink braces that were so easily identifiable from the billboard and pictures and flyers that had been about are the very things that made her identifiable the day that she was found.
Shonda's adoptive parents' names are Butch and Carolyn Rittenberry. From what I can tell, these people are saints. The family says that Butch was heartbroken for many years and simply wanted answers. He regularly visited Shonda's graveside and did regular lawn maintenance around her grave to make sure it was always in tip-top shape, and not only around her graveside, but the whole cemetery. Butch died in October of 2019.
As of this recording, it's been 13 years since the death and disappearance of Shonda. 13 years of theories, frustrations for some, and even attempting to move on for others. Shonda's disappearance has been riddled with theories. We can talk about some of the theories, but I think it's best to recap some facts about this case that remain open in Palapinna County, Texas.
Here's what we know is true. Some of this information is firsthand directly from local law enforcement who sat down with us to discuss what they could about the case. Now, what they could means that it wasn't much info that they could provide. This is still an open case. We'll talk more about that meeting a little bit later. Here's a recap of the facts. We know that Shonda left her family's 4th of July celebration in her own car and left her son Hayden with her mom Carolyn to take home and put to bed. According to her family and law enforcement, Shonda then went to a party with her friends in Mineral Wells. What happened at that party is still not completely known, at least publicly.
When Shonda is ready to head home for the night, she texts her mom to let her know that she's headed that way. That's around 12:15 a.m. early in the morning on July 5th. According to April, it was confirmed that Shonda was the one who sent that text because her best friend was standing next to her outside of the home where they were, and she watched her send it to her mother.
She obviously doesn't make it home, and the police aren't ready to file a formal missing persons report. What the family can do is report her car stolen. The police find her car later that day ransacked and ask the family to come retrieve the vehicle, despite the mysterious disappearance of Shonda. When the family picks up the vehicle, they drive it right down to the station and insist that they take the Toyota Camry in to be looked at. They believe something had to be off.
And then finally, the search is initiated by the family alongside a slew of volunteers, and it's not until the next fall that Shonda's body is discovered by a man who had been walking a property that was for sale. The official ruling from the medical examiner is undetermined. Shonda's remains were found in such a way that it was impossible to make a determination as to her cause of death.
So now that we have talked through the facts, there's a bunch of theories out there. I mean, you've heard us mention it before. If you're from Palo Pinto County, you've probably heard quite a few of the theories. One of the craziest ones that we've looked at is this blog, and I think you know way more about it than I do, but tell me what you know.
I was really addicted to this blog. I was checking it like I check Facebook just all the time to see if there had been any comments, because at some point, the Susan Murphy Milano blog just kind of took on a life of its own outside of social media. And Susan Murphy Milano was kind of her own journalist, investigator person. She wrote a book. She had lost her parents in a tragic way years before. And so because of that, she got really interested in partner intimacy crimes and things like that. So she began looking at Shonda's case as the possibility of something that maybe had happened as a crime that involved an intimate partner. And I'm not sure that that's been something that's really been a theory, especially after, some time. I think that kind of died away. I know the father of her baby was in prison at the time. So, and I've not ever heard that she was actually in a relationship. So, but as what happened is people begin to get on there and start making posts of their own thoughts. And there was some anonymous posts, quite a few anonymous posts, thousands actually.
They were weird too.
They were weird. And they were, a lot of them were put out as like poetry almost, or some kind of prose, where they were inserting the names of some local last names and first names, just interjecting them into these poems in a kind of creative way, just to maybe kind of fish some people out. And so I was really fascinated with it and thinking about, were all of these people there that night at a party? What could this have been? And so when we asked April about it, she actually knew that blog well and had gotten really into it herself. And I said, I always kind of felt like the anonymous person was a person that was maybe in law enforcement or family that was baiting the readers to see if they could fish something out by bringing up all these names, and maybe if somebody knew something, they would chime in. And she kind of affirmed that. So I don't think she read a lot into that blog in the way that most people were putting something into it, because she knew that whoever was writing those posts was trying to just put it out there as bait for somebody that might know something. And then a year or so later, I know Susan Murphy Milano passed away of cancer. And the blog, she was no longer obviously able to keep the blog going, or anyone in her circle. But there are still, that blog is still online today, and you can go there and read all of the thousands of comments that were made, and it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I looked at it for a little bit, but it was quite overwhelming, but interesting to see where people let their minds go. And knowing that there's somebody out there who is being somewhat intentional in order to maybe agitate somebody who actually did know what happened. And there's accusations out there. These are accusations, but nobody knows. Law enforcement doesn't know the real story here. As far as what has happened just yet. Hopefully one day they're able to find that out. But these accusations are intended to make somebody say, no, that's not what happened. I was there, and this is what really happened.
Exactly. And
that part hasn't happened yet, I don't think. In fact, that blog, like you said, is it's trailed or trended downward as far as comments and that kind of thing in recent years. But it is interesting to go back and to look at that blog. I know law enforcement is still working on this case. Do you kind of want to talk about what they discussed with us when we sat down with them?
Yeah, I can discuss it fairly easily because they didn't really tell us anything.
That's why I tossed it over to you. It was going to be easy.
We were actually there quite a while and visited with the sheriff's office. I'd requested a public report or anything that maybe the Mineral Wells Police Department could share with us, but they couldn't share anything, just that it is an open investigation, so therefore we're not sending you anything, but thanks for asking. And then we kind of got the same thing a little bit with the sheriff's department. They are very leery of putting anything out there that's going to hinder the very open case that they still have. In fact, they talked about, it hasn't been too long since they had a round table discussion over this case, and they're still working on it and still getting tips. They're still following up with every tip that they get. They feel like that there are people out there that do know something that are just very tight-lipped and not saying anything. And so until someone decides to come forward and say what they know, that we'll all still be in waiting mode. And so that's really what we're hoping will happen, even, kind of bringing this about now, close to the anniversary of when she passed away, hoping that someone will hear this and have a memory. Maybe they were in the convenience store that night. Maybe they saw her little grayish purple Toyota Camry, and we'll have some more information to put out there.
Yeah, you heard us discuss the theories on the blog. I kind of gave a generic answer to what my theory is because I don't know what happened. But you've got to listen to April's theory. She's the one you've been listening to, who's been the liaison for Shonda's family, and listen in on her theories of what's happened.
In my personal opinion, I think there's more than one. There's more than one person that did this to her. And if I'm not, I feel in my heart that it was at least 3 young men. I don't know if Shonda knew them well, or she had to have known them, because Shonda has anxiety. She doesn't just go up to a stranger and be like, "Hey, hi, what's going on?" That was not her personality. So it had to have been, in some way, shape, or form, something she felt at least a little bit comfortable with, or she would have never been in the situation to be harmed. I just feel it's someone she knew, or knew of. Like, maybe not distinct, you know what I mean?
Right. At least acquaintances with.
There you go. Maybe not even an acquaintance. Maybe acquaintance of somebody she knew. It's just somebody she might have bumped shoulders in a gathering, maybe. Who knows? Something like that. Who knows?
Yeah.
I've had a lot of thoughts and a lot of theories, and like I said, I've had thoughts, but it's like my main thing was how could it come to that, though? How could it get to that? I mean, if somebody sought out to do her harm, and let's say they did try to drug her and something went terribly wrong and Shonda died, how did she get to that situation where that happened? It blows my mind, because people just don't vanish off the face of the earth. Somebody has seen something, somebody knows something, and somebody in that town knows what happened to my niece, my Shonda. And that's why I've always said it to this day. It's the best kept secret in Mineral Wells.
I was encouraged for the most part when we went to meet with the sheriff's office the other day, because there's a lot of time that's passed. Every year the anniversary happens and people are reminded of this loss, and reminded for their family, of Shonda's family, of the hurt that they may be experiencing that continues to happen. One of the things that I thought was interesting when we were talking to April was when she gave Carolyn the information that they had found Shonda's body, she was almost at, her response wasn't extreme. I think that was interesting because she's a person of faith. And I think they almost expected this to happen. You heard us mention that earlier, but they expected to get this phone call. It doesn't make it easy, but it was almost part of, after her being gone for that long, they were waiting on that phone call. And then Carolyn's next question was, what's next? When can we bury our little girl? And so that was just heartbreaking to hear, but there's an overarching theme of faith in the Rittenberry family, which I think is very interesting too, because I've never been in a situation like that, but there seems to be, as a person of faith, there seems to be that there's no other place you can go in a situation like that but to turn to your faith, turn to the Lord, and for that peace to be to come from Him, because there's nowhere else you're going to get it. So when I think about her, Carolyn Rittenberry, as a person of faith, and think about her character, her role in this story, it wasn't surprising to me when she got that news, and she just was almost at peace that things were finally being put to rest, or that part of the story was being put to rest. But I think now that next step is we've got to figure out what happened.
Right. And I don't think you and I are going to be able to figure that out, even with all of the researching that we've done. I know we haven't done nearly as much as law enforcement or the family or her friends. We're just kind of touching the tip of the iceberg here. But we are compelled by Shonda's story. We are compelled by just the trying to relate to a family that has lost a daughter. They've lost a sister, a niece, a little boy lost his mom. And someone out there, like she said, it's the best. She thinks it's the best kept secret in Mineral Wells. Yeah. And that's kind of been ringing in my head ever since she said that, because someone out there does know.
Right.
And so my appeal would be to anyone who's listening that if you have any information regarding Shonda and what happened that night, even the smallest thing, that you would let someone know. If you've kept it to yourself all these years and thought it wasn't that big a deal, or, maybe you're afraid that something could happen to you if you shared that, just want to ask you to reconsider, if you're a person of faith, trust the Lord that it's the right thing to do.
I spoke the other day with Shonda's little sister. Her name's Shelby. And just to confirm a few things about who Shonda was, where she worked, and that kind of thing. And I said, is there one thing that you want to make sure that we put in this podcast about your sister? And she said, I think the one thing is that I hope her light never goes out. And I think what she meant by that was, please don't forget about my sister. Please remember who she was. And she still referred to Shonda in present tense, which I thought was interesting too, is please remember who Shonda was and is today. And her comment about not letting Shonda's light go out was interesting to me and made me understand that this is still very real to her. She's gone through a lot since all of this happened. That was her big sister who she followed around everywhere. And so the different stories we've heard from different people, and everybody's got their 2 cents in this small town about what potentially happened that night. But ultimately, no matter what happened, I mean, there's theories about drugs, there's theories about partying too hard, there's theories about everything you could imagine. But ultimately, Shonda her family deserves to have some justice, and for there to be an answer of what happened to her on that night. So again, if you know anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to Palo Pinto County Sheriff's Office and let them know.